Hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here, Basketball Rewind as always. And today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. But first, I'm going to introduce our guests, of course, Beyond the Locker Room, Coach Roach, as well as we are joined again by Trey. I will say this: we are filming it on the same day. Don't worry, we do change our clothes. Uh, that is important, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh, please.
have. Anyways, there's a lot of directions we can go with that, but we will not today. Today we're here to talk hoops. So today I am very interested because there's a topic that I've always wanted to talk about, which is the influence of 2K and TikTok on how people view the NBA, how people, not only consume it, but the way that people now think about the game. And I don't think it's been good. Just to say it flat out. I think there are good things and bad things. So I think just to lay out the topic in full, I think the positive things is that it's allowed the game to grow very quickly. I think it was one of the smartest decisions that Adam Silver has made, which is hey, if you're on YouTube, if you're on all the whatever content creation platform, you can use the game footage as long as it's not an entire game by itself. With that being said, I think the problem is, before I get to the 2K point, is you're seeing these bite-sized versions of the game, and so what people tend to value changes. It's going to be what makes that, which is going to be more highlights, and sometimes the highlight players are not the little do little everything kings type players. So I'll open it up with that, and then we'll quickly talk about the 2K point after. Thoughts?
That was very loaded. Um, I think overall, like the presence of like I wouldn't even center it around just 2K, just like the presence of the internet in general. I think what's different, and I'll call myself a boomer. The difference between like now and then is just like the access to information that people have. For me to learn like a new move or something that I wanted to do when I was playing basketball, I'm either learning it from an NBA game that I'm watching or the people that are around me. And you're usually picking up a move based on the effectiveness of how it works. You see someone play a pickup, they're being effective with this move. Let me also utilize this. Whereas like on other platforms, the TikToks, the 2Ks, you're seeing it in like you said in the bite size version, and there's also the thought leaders and like influencers aren't necessarily now NBA players in terms of like the move set that people are picking up. So there's kids that are playing obviously with the internet. People are outside less, so they're getting influenced less about the people that are actually playing basketball, and they're able to pick up moves off of a 5 minute, 5 second clip, and you don't necessarily have the in real life experience to know whether that move is going to be successful or not. So we get a lot of players of what my good friend Josh Cordonero also says, workout ball.
Yeah. I think I agree with Trey a lot with a lot of what he said. I think it's the digesting of these small bites of what you think is basketball, and what you then get to your point. I think you used the word value, right? In this case, and what you value now is what is considered to be good basketball or a good player, and it's very different than what is actually considered to be defined as what a good player is, right? No one finds in this case a back cut sexy. There's nothing to go and show about that, right? It's like, ooh, look at that sexy back cut. No one cares about that. No, people want to see in this case the highlights, your handle, whatever it might be. You're shooting threes from 40 feet and stuff like that, and then say, ooh, look at that, or trick shots, wherever it might be. And I think there it starts skewing, kind of moves it, it kind of skews the window a little bit exactly of who in this case, even to the front of recruiting, right? Like who is actually getting attention when it comes to recruiting. I think it's even skewed it in that way, right? Because if you all of a sudden have like X amount of followers on Instagram, you're someone that people say you should watch. In this case, that's a kid that someone needs to watch. Doesn't mean a kid can't play, but if another guy in this case just solid in this case and is really good at what he does, but is not as flashy, he too might get caught in this case and not getting the same type of excitement or pub as the other guy in this case that's quite flashy in this case. So it has its reach in different areas of basketball in this case in different contexts. I mean, from that to the consumption of it from a media standpoint, where we've seen it for a while, where like certain players just get a lot of like attention in this case that are not necessarily the best players in the game, but because they are quite flashy, they're on the billboard all the time in this case, but not necessarily the most winning players in this case. I ain't gonna name no names. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'll start nothing. I'm just saying there are certain players in this case that that people are drawn to, and the 2K one. I'll wait a second, but I think it's a different element with that. But yeah, I think that's what I think it's hurt the game quite a bit in some ways when it comes to that part. I think the growth's great, but the trade off that's happened, it's made discourse a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Instant gratification. That's kind of the the time in which we are living in right now. Everybody's attention spans, I'm sure if you took people's attention spans today, the average person versus someone 30, 40 years ago, probably the person 30, 40 years ago would have a higher attention span just because we're so desensitized to all that comes at us today. And I find too, like with this with TikTok, like you're going to see the highlights, you're going to see the dunks and stuff like that. I'm always like, because I've done coaching and training, it's like that guy or I should say male or female, they've put in tens, if not hundreds of hours into their craft, into developing that skill in which they're able to do. They do it in an open gym or a closed gym or in a 2-on-2 or scrimmage and stuff like that. And I always find it's like you have to put in a ton of work and a ton of skill and development to become really good at something. And I find maybe what gets lost is the work that actually goes into it. Like the highlights are great in small doses and stuff like that in the short term, but like if a kid really wants to get good at something, you have to put TikTok away. You have to get in contact with a coach. You can go online, you can look up NBA trainers or certain drills and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to put in the work. And I find the work gets lost in translation for someone who's wanting to get good, whether it's basketball or if it's chess. It's the same concept.
I will add also, I do think like kids today are more skilled than I was at the exact same age. I think like a positive effect of obviously like the internet just in general is like you just have more access to obviously the type of drills that you can do, the type of moves that you can do, and your creativity is stretched much further than someone 20 years ago that only had the influence of the 10 to 20 people that are around them.
I do wonder, I guess the flip side to coach's point is the prioritization of what you're working on is from the player perspective. Now, I'm not saying all players. I think I agree with you, coach. I think that the players put a lot of work in the craft and stuff like that. But I keep thinking about what the comments that Zion mentioned a few weeks ago when they asked him about working on in between game, right? And he's like pretty much all like, what do you mean I got to work on in between game? And I found it interesting of him of all players because if you had to think of the player in this case that kind of launched this type of celebrity, he's the one. I mean, Zion, we were seeing highlights of Zion like when he's like 15 in this case here, like seeing what this kid was doing. Do it for Instagram or wherever case. He was like the first one I can recall where this like phenomenon from a social media standpoint where it popped off. And I found it interesting for him when he said that. I was like, he essentially was saying, I'm good in this case. What I gets the job done. Now, part of that might just be the fact that what he's done his work for his entire career. Fair enough. But I do wonder a little bit in this case is like, hey, it's kind of like it's kind of like, go with the one that brought you in this case, the dance. He dunks and explosive moves is what brought him here. He's not looking to do anything else, right? Like, we don't want to do any footwork in the mid post. Like, I don't want to do anything like that. Nah. Why do I want to do that for? So this is what got me here. Why did you do anything else? So I don't know if that has had an effect on that as well too. But it's fascinating to have this discussion that he just popped in my head because to me, he is like I hate to say the poster boy, but he's the first one I can recall where this phenomena of of the social media hoop celebrity from the time they were young, in this case, came across it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points. Again, I said that it's largely a bad thing just because of what people value, what people are focusing on. But obviously, the more that you grow the game, I'm all about that. Um, there's obviously like a reach factor where um, the game is. I mean, I think that this game is going to just continue to explode and grow because, I mean, for better or for worse, this is a game that is easy to grow because it appeals to a demographic of people that normally wouldn't be able to afford to go to a hockey rink because they can't afford to build a hockey rink in certain places, or it doesn't need a lot of equipment. So there's a lot of from that side of things where I think it's really, really good. Now, in terms of the 2K specific aspect, um, my issue, aside from how it's been monetized, is I feel like 2K. How do I put this? There's certain attributes in 2K that exist arbitrarily that the way that life works is different now. Dame just had his best year ever. Obviously, they sat him near the end of the year, but he just had his best year ever. He's past the age of 30. In 2K, there's like a potential score, and once you reach that 29, it just that's it. It's done, and then it just like you go downhill. And I feel like that's influenced how people view certain stars. Instead of saying, okay, this guy plays this way, his game will scale well. Now, to get a little bit into the peak conversation, and we don't, I've looked at a couple studies, but yes, I think that you stop. I'll say you maintain for longer than people think, but I'm not necessarily saying that in general it's people are gonna get better. I think it's more of like a refinement of skill at a certain point, but still, I think people are acting like the age curve, like you hit 31 and it's like, oh well, that's it, my leg's done, right? And I don't think it really works like that. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but yeah.
Just before we start, my laptop is on literally 1%. So if you guys can go, I'll just run and grab my charger. Just
Okay, cool.
Go for it.
So I mean, I think we all play 2K here. We all have 2K, so it's not we hate 2K or anything like that. But I think two things has come out of this for the 2K mentality. I think a little bit, and it's mostly effective fandom on two fronts. One, roster construction. We had this joke the other day as we were talking, and people really think it's like, oh, you give X, Y, and Z, and that should just work, and you should have your team because you could get away with it on 2K in this case here. It's like, yeah, player A, B, and C, yeah, and you have a super team. It doesn't work that way. And I find that having discussion with folks, like the roster construction discussion, people really think that's, like that's so simple because, hey, it works on 2K. Hey, why can't it work in real life? I think the second part from the 2K standpoint is the perception of certain players. And if you have fun playing with certain players on 2K, they're ballers on 2K, they can do all the cool moves on 2K, that means that person must be much better than what they are in this game, than what they really are in real life, or versus player B. I think funny enough, I think the star in this city in this case is a perfect example of the opposite one, right? Siakam is not considered to be a flashy player. And I think some of the ways that hurts him against other people that maybe don't follow the game as closely or follow outside their own local team. So they think in this case here is like, oh yeah, you see numbers like, oh, he's not this, he's that, or blah blah. The next thing they're not seeing all the other things that Siakam does because he's not a flashy player. He don't have quote the bag quite like some other guys that you could play on 2K. And I think that mentality seeps into conversation and discourse amongst the fandom, and that's where I think where 2K's influence shows up. I think when it comes to roster construction, and it comes to fandom, when it comes about seeing how well certain players are versus other players.
Well, before anyone else jumps in, I'll just quickly add, like, to that point, and also to the last point about highlights. You see this where it's like, if you play my team on 2K, for those of you who do, you can get like a black galaxy, like blah blah player, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're a flashy player and you've had certain moments, you'll be more likely to have that card come out. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's like all of a sudden people are going to be, I don't know, just some people might think Lonnie Walker is better than LeBron, for example, because he has the 99 overall. I'm not saying that people do. I'm just saying like that as an example. And it kind of does influence things. So yeah, anyways, Coach, you were, I think, up next.
I think 2K, kind of like what Beyond said, I pretty much agree with everything that he said about roster construction. I think too with 2K, it's added significance for the superstars today in the NBA. What I mean by that is it's very easy and it's more enjoyable to play with someone who's rated 95 versus 65. Now, who's rated 95? The superstars are the KDs, the Giannis, the Lucas, and stuff like that, right? So when you're playing the game, you're like, okay, my shot meter actually works pretty well with these guys or with Steph because these guys can actually shoot, and I'm enjoying the game more because it's a lot of offense and stuff like that. Versus someone who's like a 65 or a 75, who's probably actually a pretty good player because most of the NBA is made up of role players, not superstars. I think I heard friends, was it friends Priscilla said like 90% of the NBA actually is role players, and the other 10% are more or less the superstars and stuff like that, or stars. So just from a 2K perspective, it's added a lot of I say like if you are a star in the NBA and then people like using you in 2K, I think that kind of adds to the your mystique maybe a little bit or your importance and stuff like that, if that makes sense. So 2K in that sense to the superstars is really good.
Yeah. I had a point before Trey jumped in, but one and be fair, it's not just basketball because right now they're doing the same thing right now on ESPN with Madden and Madden ratings. So like it's the same dynamic playing out where it's like guys are literally offended that there's an X rating on Madden. It's like folks like guys are pretty much ready to like scrap with folks. It's like really or a Madden rating. So it's not just a basketball thing. I'm sure there's if you're a FIFA fan, I'm sure the same thing's going on there as well too. But you mentioned something, Coach. I don't know, Trey. Go ahead. I forgot the point you mentioned something. I wanted to state something about that, but go ahead.
I think overall, like ratings in video games is just like a good reference point for fans, and that's why people like hold it very dearly. Just because as a fan, you can rationalize Pascal Siakam being at 87 overall and Trey Young being at 89 overall. That means that this player is better than this player for this set of reasons and by this much. It's easier to rationalize it than obviously looking at watching film and seeing the reasoning why one player would be higher or another. Overall, I think in terms of like players, like the marketability of a player is like exponentially higher if they're a good 2K player. One of the reasons why Steph Curry was the most marketable player like very early is that he played a game that people wanted to replicate, and in the video game, he's the most fun player to play with. So that you attach yourself to that person, you then end up watching their games more often, and also you're going to buy their shoes, buy their merch of the team. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why players care about it so much, and the overall influence now. Every player that is coming into the NBA grew up on 2K.
Yep.
Whereas like 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. So I think overall they want to be rated highly in the game that they grew up watching.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's answer for you. I mean, the Madden comp in this case, for example, I got no issues. I'm glad you got his money for the saying up front. But Lamar is the most favorite player you want to play if you're playing in Madden, right? But is Lamar the first and second or third or fourth best quarterback in the league? Probably not in this case here. But he's the most fun one to play in Madden. Hell yeah, in this case, right? Back in the day, it was like others like Vic and stuff like that. But like the same thing goes with basketball. There's certain there's certain players in this case that have that type of like magnetism that draw them when you play the game. You want to associate yourself with them. And I think it's interesting because I think the other thing that comes out of this, and this is why I wanted to make the point about when it comes to roster construction, and this came up in the discussion just the other day. When you're making trades in this case here, it's all megabytes. In this case, you're making a deal, right? And fine trades. Everyone says, "Oh, so and so could play with so and so." When it's real life, you got relationships and you got elements of human nature. In this case, you got to figure out in this case here if you're trying to make deals with folks. It's not quite the same thing, and I think sometimes that part of it gets lost in this case in translation when it comes to discourse sometimes, where it's like, oh, just trade X for Y. It's like, hold on one second. You can't just trade X for Y. You got to see why, Z over here doesn't really want to be playing with Y coming in this case here, or how their games may mesh or something like that. And I think that's been lost a little bit. In I guess more of having nuanced discussions about, especially around trade deadline. Holy cow! It's just like trade deadline is just off the wall with the amount of like trades that make no sense. But if you were playing 2K, they probably would make sense. Where it's like, what are we talking about, guys? Like, come on, man, let's be real. But I think that's where you see it play to show its fate, show its head the most at the trade deadline for the most part.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that it affects how people manage expectations about players. So this goes back to my idea about like certain like the potential rating, where it's like you see, if I just simulate a couple years down, Scotty Barnes is automatically, like X player. He's an MVP, and I'm not trying to put it on
No, I
any
know where you're
particular
going.
player. I'm just saying like it doesn't work like that. There's a lot of things in between. I never reached the level of making it to the Olympics. I won't say the sport here. I'll tell you guys after. But I was in a sport where I was training essentially for the Olympics. I was second in BC in that sport at some point. So I know what it's like to, spend your entire summers, training again and again and again, about 6 days a week, 5 hours minimum per day at a young age, all the way through till 18 for me. Actually it was about till 20. But yeah, it's tough. It's a lot of work, and a lot of people don't see that. And that's not, I mean, I guess in the new 2K you got to go to the gym and do all that kind of stuff, and at that point just go outside. But it's a lot of people don't really fully understand what it takes to be good, and then go from being good to great. And that becoming great is not necessarily an automatic linear or definitely not exponential for most people's in terms of process. So yeah.
Which brings up an interesting point though. And how many, I mean, I'm saying more younger, like let's say kids in this case, or just young, teenagers, whatever the case may be. How many of these guys are playing so much 2K and stuff like that like the game through 2K and grew up watching in this case? How many of them actually play basketball?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I think all of us here, more times than not, man, we're the moment school's done. Once you have your homework, you're in the blacktop and you're for a run. I don't know how, unless you're organized back, everything's organized nowadays, but I don't know how much organic, hey, let's look for a run type of thing exists that much anymore, where it's like you just go out there and just look for a run at any park or wherever the case may be. Like, that element seems to be disappearing. Trey, you tell me, man, you see that you play in the more than anyone else. I'm done retired. I try to keep my knees and stuff like that.
Yeah. As I've got older, I've played 2K less. But I think overall it's 2K now, like, you have the internet, so you're able just to connect with your friends in a way that like I wasn't able to, like, at a younger age. And you're doing not the exact same thing, but you're able to have the same basketball experience, utilize the players that you want. And in the most part, in 2K, you're going to be able to do things that you can't do in real life. And that's exciting in a sense as well. So I think overall kids are definitely playing less. Like you go by a playground, kids are playing a lot less in general, but I think people are just outside less in general overall. So I wouldn't say it's a direct correlation to 2K, but overall in like terms of basketball discourse, I don't think that a rating should be the precipice of like saying a player is good or bad.
Yeah, it kind of like video games too, particularly 2K. Like, it's expanded so much in the last 20 years. Like, I had NBA Live 2004. It had Vince Carter in the front of it. And, you had your exhibition games, you had your seasons, playoffs. That's about it, and the options to choose what setting you want it on. Now you got like My League, My GM, you got playoff mode, exhibition mode, My GM mode. Like, there's so much variety for a person, and you could play like online and stuff like that. So there's so much variety for a person. Like, I like GM mode, so I'm going to be a GM. Or, you know what, I just like going online and playing with other people on the blacktop, kind of what Beyond said. And or I want to start my own franchise. And so it's just more variety today than it was like 15, 20 years ago too, for someone to open up that audience that maybe they didn't once have.
I
I was
will.
gonna say it's almost like so much variety. It's like Masai right now. So many pathways to go. You just don't know what to do. Sorry, Beyond, you were gonna say something.
I just want to say on a positive tip, what I do like what 2K does in this case, specifically 2K, is like they do find a way to kind of bring back the old eras. So if you're not really a historian of basketball or NBA specifically, and you're not knowing about old players, by playing like the My Eras, for example, you could get a feel of like, oh, this guy played. Oh, that's so and so's dad. I didn't know he actually played in the NBA because now he's a third in the league. Now has a father that played in the NBA at this point, so you can see someone's dad in this case at some point. It's like, okay, I didn't realize he played on this team, stuff like that. So it does give some knowledge and education from that standpoint, which I think 2K does a better job of that than most sports games. Kind of wish some of the other sports games would do that, but it's a whole topic for another day. But
Yeah, I'll also just say that to Coach's point, to be more serious, it is almost overly complex. I finally played like a first season. I didn't play the whole season, but I kind of went through some of the options, and I was like, oh, you have to choose ticket prices, you have to do, all these different things that they give you as stuff that you have to do, and it takes a lot of time to get through it. And then in a way, it's like we might be almost getting away from the fun of it. That's a whole again topic for another day. Is like our video games not are video games not fun? Should we go outside more? Probably. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you can get so complex to like again to ticket prices and concession. I remember in the old Madden, this is a while ago, I can't remember which one it was, but you could like pick like both the drink prices and the other price, and it was like like this is just too
yeah,
much.
I think it's in the teens you could do that, like 2015 or 2016. Yeah, you could do
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun, but it's like I don't know if that's necessarily what I'm going for. What I do think that is very interesting is to Trey's point. It seems like now moving forward, they are kind of like what was it the other day? You logged into 2K and it's like Wemby is doing like hey check out the whatever you know check out Raptors Republic or something. This for whatever's going on. I think I would hope, I don't think that they will, but I would hope that they include FIBA. And also in terms of the WNBA, the women's side of the game, I think that it's really helped that to grow as well. And I really like that. Like the fact that like, Sue Bird is my coach, for example. I think that's really awesome. And that's something that you really don't, I don't know if that would have happened the other, otherwise, because I mean we've talked about it, and I don't think that the commissioner of the WNBA currently has the same type of vision that we've seen, and that's probably held them back a little bit more than a lot of other things. So yeah.
I still like playing video games. I still enjoy 2K to some extent, but like I hear you. Some days, man, it gets a little rough, man. Jump shots tough to do. Some days, so I feel like I don't mind going inside, but sometimes I want to be able to knock down a 17-footer just for the fun of it, Oh boy, anything else, really, or
Coach Trey, any final thoughts?
Nothing really. I just think overall, there's probably like a middle ground where, like there's the rise of like the influencers of basketball. There's probably a middle ground that needs to be met where here's this really cool thing that I'm doing, but there also needs to be this vessel. Here's the tools and access to like what's actually effective in basketball. And I think finding that middle ground, like as like a teenager, is probably where we'll get to eventually.
we'll be all right.
Coach?
Go back to the old NBA games, find their offensive plays, and use that for today for your high school teams.
That's an
I'm just kidding.
interesting point.
I know some coaches that will go back to old video games, find plays on there, and then implement it into their offense.
Nowadays it's true though. Like,
I mean, one day you're going to see, almost the opposite. Instead of going from high school to the NBA, they'll go, hey, the boxing won, and they'll bring it back to the high school. It'll be like a loop. So with that being said, I'll see you guys on 2K later. No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, that brings us to the close of this conversation. I think it's been fun. All the conversations that we've had, of course. Trey, you're welcome anytime. Although I'm going to be quite busy because I am studying for a big test between now and the end, so I'm going to be doing less of these. But with that being said, it's been fun. Is there anything that you guys want to plug? I guess again.
No, it's been great. Once again, follow Raptors Republic on all platforms. There's tons of amazing writers there. We do have a paywall section, and that helps us support the writers on staff. It allows them to grow in their careers and not have to go into other spaces, and pay them a fair wage. So support local media and just help can make this thing grow and continue to be good for people like me who wanted a chance in this field as well.
Yeah, I'll also add that like we're in a very strange and different media market than most other teams, or we don't have a lot of independent media. So definitely, Raptors Republic is one of those places, and also it's fostered and kind of like helped grow a lot of careers from it, as it will probably continue to do. So yeah, definitely support it. I actually support it. I remember when they had Rapcoin and all that kind of stuff. I did that too. So people, it will be in the link. There will be a link in the description down below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us what you think about the 2K stuff, of course. And with that being said, have a good day. Try to get outside while playing 2K. Maybe play 2K outside. I don't know. But with that being said, it's been fun. So peace.